able to infuse it so that it can be used in this writer's workshop format.
So here's our lineup for today. During the rest of our time together, we've already talked about the rationale and the objectives and the connection to our county curriculum. But we're going to give you a road test in a moment where we're going to pre-assess your knowledge of the 6 traits and writer's workshop. And then we're going to take you through an assembly line where you're going to build your muse for the rest of the morning. We're going to then take a break and give you some content we call the nuts. And that's where Karen will talk about the basics of writer's workshop. Then we will give you the steering wheel again, and we're going to have you start your engines with a writing prompt. We will take a break from writing and go back to content, taking care of the bolts or the 6 traits of writing informational piece. And the bulk of our time together will be spent on these pit stops. And these are the workshop stations where that you will be able to touch, feel, hold, and experience from the point of view of a learner in our classrooms. And hopefully while you're in those pit stops, you're thinking about what is applicable to your own classroom environment, and also what you might need to do or want to do to modify it in some way to make it manageable. Then we're going to regroup from those pit stops and take a victory lap where you'll get to share the results of your writing today. And finally, we will celebrate in the winner's circle with a post-assessment reflection piece.
So we're just asking you to reflect for a second. I set in the center of the tables just some half sheets of paper. And we're just asking you to think about yourself as a teacher of writing, regardless of what grade level you teach. And think about writer's workshop and the 6 traits of writing, and put yourself on that racetrack. 5 being dead last, you don't really know a lot about it, you use it minimally or not at all. Or first place, meaning you know a lot about it and use both often. And we're hoping that as the time moves on this morning, that you will be able to find yourself moving along that racetrack to get yourself to first place. And if you're already at first place, please feel free to chime in at any point with your own expertise and knowledge, because we'd appreciate it. Go ahead.
Is there anyone that willing to say dead last? Thank you for being honest. Anyone giving themselves a score of 4 or 3 right about now? Thank you. Anyone thinking they're a 1 or a 2? Okay, I'm calling on you, Purple. Okay, fair enough. Well, hopefully you'll be close to the end when we're all done this morning. All right, here's our assembly line. You're going to build your muse for the morning. Karen's coming around with a plate and some Play-Doh, and we want you to use this Play-Doh to build a model of a car. A car. That's all I'm going to say. I'm going to watch the clock to make sure you take about 5 minutes to construct that model, but I'm not giving you any other criteria. 5 minutes in a car is all you need to remember.
Gave you the plate so that we can preserve the tables. You know, we don't want to have to clean them up.
You know, custodians don't like Play-Doh and carpets. Moms don't like it either.
Don't you love the solid Play-Doh? There's something about it. And I know a lot of people think of Play-Doh as very elementary, but we'll show you later. We tried this out with some middle schoolers, and it doesn't matter what your age is, everybody loves Play-Doh.
Just think about how happy you are now with it.
Yeah.
How soothing it is. College kids love Play-Doh and stickers. High schoolers love Play-Doh and stickers.
this quote, and I especially love it tied to the Play-Doh car you just made. Often I tell young children that making a piece of writing is not very different from making a clay rabbit. You pull in to sculpt the ears, then you pull back to ask, how do these look? You pull in to reshape one ear, to bend over the other, you pull back to ask, is it better? While I'm talking, you're going to constantly be just touching that car a little bit because you see a little detail you want to fix or a little crack you want to smooth out. That's how we want kids to look at writing. But as we all know, being in the classroom, it takes effort to get kids to look at it again. They take their piece and they say, I'm done. This is awesome. Read this, Miss Wills, read this. And we have to find ways to get them to look at it again and to want to reshape it. Well, Writer's Workshop lends itself very nicely for that. It is a block of time where kids learn about the processes. They get to plan. They get to organize. They get to publish their work. And because it's their topics, and because of the way it's set up, there become multiple drafts. So even sometimes without them knowing, they're reshaping it, trying to make it that better piece. Now, in a perfect world, Writer's Workshop has 4 main blocks. Not everybody can teach a classroom and have a perfect world. Most of us can't. But 45 minutes would be that perfect world scenario. You get a mini lesson for 5. You had some quiet writing and thinking time where nobody's talking or moving around. It's that ideas generating time. You move through stations, which we call pit stops, which we're going to talk to you about and let you see kind of in motion. And then you have a time where you have author's chair. Now, that mini lesson, that 5-minute mini lesson in the beginning of the year is really set up where you are setting up Writer's Workshop. Can you give me my next slide? Thanks. And so you're really you're not using any of that time for actual writing instruction. You're using that time for what does a peer conference look like? How does editing work? How does revising work? And so that's really in the beginning of the year what you're doing with your mini lesson. However, as your Writer's Workshop gets set in motion, you're able to use those 5 to 7-minute blocks for a particular piece of instruction, something either that you want the kids to know more about in writing, something you've noticed as you're having these teacher conferences that every kid seems to be missing. Commas in a series, they never got that, so we need a mini lesson on it, let's do some stuff with it. Or quotation marks, or trying to improve their word choice. But it's all based on what you see in your kids' writing. Now, a lot of people think, oh, lordy, I got math, I got social studies, I got science, now I gotta think about a writer's topic every time I do Writer's Workshop. There are books made called Mini Lessons for Writer's Workshop. So it's not something you have to create. There's plenty of information and research out there that would walk you through any kind of mini lesson. But as you become more comfortable with it, it just becomes kind of natural. You know, the other day I had a teacher conference and there's no comma separating the quotation marks and who said it in 3 different kids. I've got to work on that. So my next 2 mini lessons are going to be concentrating on quotation marks, that type of thing. The quiet writing and thinking time in my classroom, they could be anywhere in the room. Lucy Calkins talks about the freedom to move, the freedom to get comfortable. You think of your ideas best when you're comfortable. So maybe they're sitting on the floor, maybe they're sitting in a rocking chair, maybe they're laying across the floor. During that time, it's very quiet and it's all about content and ideas. During the stations time, there's movement, there's noise, and in our school, it's a hard time because we have to minimize noise because of the open space. But I always say to my kids, I know the difference between productive noise and non-productive noise. And during Writer's Workshop, my classroom has productive noise. It's phenomenal because they're allowed to collaborate at that point. They have an idea and they really want to share it and they want to talk about it, or maybe they want to pair up with somebody and write something. They have to complete a peer conference, so they're meeting with someone with a form that's walking them through it. So there's noise, but it's really good noise. Plus I'm running a teacher conference, and so that's also adding to the noise. And then author's chair, and I'll be honest, because I don't teach in a perfect world, author's chair in my classroom doesn't happen every writer's workshop time. Because there isn't time for it, we do it maybe once a week, and that's for, eventually as your writer's workshop gets going, it's for kids who have published pieces. Initially, just to get the author's chair as part of your workshop, it might be, everybody bring what you wrote today and pick out your favorite sentence, or pick out the best words you used, or who's got a story starter that's just gonna blow our minds. Let's share that today, because obviously in the first month, you don't have a lot of published pieces, so you have to find ways to bring in those things they're writing. And contents of the parking lot will come up in a little bit in what she's gonna talk about. That has to do with idea building.
You ready to start your engines?
Ready or not?
Your task for the next 10 to 15 minutes, I think, is to write a story, or it could be a poem, a magazine advertisement, any other piece of writing that you are inspired by. But it needs to be about your car, the car right in front of you. So here are some things to think about while you're drafting. Is your car going any place special? Is there anyone important driving your car? Has your car been places we need to know about? Has it had any special VIP passengers? Are there any Mac Daddy features in there? Is it tripped out? In elementary, we usually start this process with some sort of a graphic organizer. So if you want to do some sort of a map or web to just get started, that might work. Or if you're ready to go right into sentences, go right ahead. But this is your drafting time now. Writing about your car. Those pens are getting put down, I'm getting ready to talk about the bolts, or the 6 traits of writing. Developed by a very intelligent woman named Ruth Cohen. These are resources that the county has provided that she's written, and our county has adopted her 6 traits model. What I like to do is describe it as a universal language. As it was mentioned in my bio, I am a math trained person. I am not a writer. So when I came to the elementary level and they told me I'm teaching all subjects, including writing, I had no idea not only how to coach kids, but how to talk to them about age-appropriate mistakes. Because I know what my writing level is, and I wasn't sure how to communicate with kids on their level. This 6 traits model is a wonderful resource for talking to kids about how to improve their writing, strengthen their writing, using keywords and phrases. We start with the trait of ideas. Ideas is the overall message, and if you have strong ideas in your writing, your reader gets a very clear sense of what you're trying to convey. We provided packets for each one of you, and in those packets is a wonderful resource to help kids collect ideas. This resource is called a parking lot, and it comes out of a book that looks like this. All of these books that we're referring to are listed in a bibliography in the packet, so don't feel like you need to copy down a bunch of titles and authors. But in this book and in your packet is something that looks like this. It's called a parking lot. Now in my classroom, I put this on cardstock, and each of my kids gets a writing folder or a writer's notebook in Karen's class, where they would store this parking lot. And they're also given a small supply of sticky notes. And ideally, if a student is inspired by something to write about later, obviously they can't drop everything and write all day long, but this provides them a place to park those ideas. For example, in 3rd grade we teach a unit on fairy tales. And so we read the traditional Cinderella, but I also like to explore other versions or variations of Cinderella. So there's this one that my boys love called Dino-rella, because it pulls in the dinosaur theme, but the story elements and the characters are very similar. So at some point, some kid might hear me read aloud the story Dino-rella, and they think, oh, I'm into warrior cats, I love cats. What if there was a story called Jaguarella? I'm gonna write that story. So they would use their sticky notes to write Jaguarella on the sticky note, park that idea in their parking lot, and now when we have our next free writing thinking time, they don't sit there twiddling their thumbs or picking their nose for the full 10 minutes. They go back to their parking lot, look at their sticky note and say, I can start here. So, love this idea. It has worked really well in my classroom. I don't know how it works in yours, Ms. Karen, but that's just a nice way to encourage the development and stockpiling of ideas so that those quiet writing thinking times are productive. There's also the trait of organization, and as elementary trained teachers, this is the thing we do the best. We have an organizer for everything. Cause and effect, compare, contrast, time order, you name it. And so this is where we get to shine, because we can teach the trait of organization through all these great graphic organizers. But it really is the skeleton of a writing piece. Then there's the trait of voice. And as a classroom teacher, I have to admit, this is the hardest trait to teach children. How do they get a tone in their writing when they have such limited life experience? Or vice versa. They're so passionate about a topic, but how do they separate the fact from the opinion? And so pay attention to where we have embedded the trait of voice in our pit stops, because it really is a challenge at the elementary level, at least, to teach this effectively. But it's a way for the writer to emotionally connect with his or her reader. Then we've got 3 more traits to talk about. The trait of word choice, which is all about rich and colorful language in the writing. So how many times does your student use the word said in their writing piece? Well, let's brainstorm some other synonyms for said and try to spice it up with replied or asked or conveyed. And so you can really do some wonderful vocabulary enrichment through the trait of word choice. Sentence fluency is all about the flow of the writing. Are we working with a bunch of short, choppy sentences? Are we working with long, run-on sentences that go for a page and a half? Is there a way, as a writer, we can come up with a mixture of both simple and complex sentences so that we have a nice flow from beginning to end? And then, as a middle school trained teacher, conventions is what I thought writing was all about. This is the one I could easily do. I knew when a sentence needed a capital letter at the beginning or a period at the end, but the traits really opened my eyes to how many more layers of writing there are and how I can help kids develop that writing. But the conventions is what we all kind of grew up with in school. This is the grammar, the punctuation, the capitalization, the spelling, and indenting for paragraphs.
But wait, there's more.
Oh, wait, there's more. And now I get another trait absolutely free. I told you she's brilliant. This Ruth Cullum, after she put out 6 traits of writing, introduced a 7th trait. So now she's got materials that all look the same, but they say 6 plus 1. She makes another set of $1 million, right? Because all the companion texts now have to say 6 plus 1. And that 7th trait, that plus 1, we use those terms interchangeably, and it really just means presentation. Presentation finally gets that entire writing process, from pre-writing to publishing, covered with traits. Because the presentation is that finished writing piece, whether it's typed, handwritten, is it in poster format, is it on a blog? And so if you hear us talking about the traits, yes, our county has only adopted the 6, but in order to encompass the entire writing process, we're talking about the +1 as well.
You know what I was thinking about is we're starting to study the Common Core that's coming at us. Publishing is throughout it. And so whether our county has the 6 or not, they're gonna bring on the 7
Yeah.
because you're gonna have to
So we're one step ahead of the game, right?
Yeah, because Writers Workshop incorporates all of
That's
it.
right, that's right.
So here's what we did. So we came up with all this research and we thought, we've got something going on here. We have got to try this out before we take it to what they call Visitors Day, where teachers, administrators, and everyone come and see these presentations you've put together. But, I mean, we know, being teachers, you can't get up and preach something if you don't know whether it works or not. So we decided to try it out on some kids over the summer. So right there, asking kids over the summer to do schoolwork, we knew we were up for a challenge. Well, I have 3 at home, Jill has 1, and my middle schooler had 3 friends out on the front basketball hoop. And so we said, we need you for an hour. Can you come in? Can you hang with us? And most of them were like, sure, Mrs. Wills. And one of them was like, oh, I don't want to come in. But anyway, we did. We bribed them with popsicles. And we said, we just need you for an hour. And we kind of took them through what we've taken you through so far and the next step. The reason we want to show it to you now, we're going to show you now what we kind of did with them. Then we're going to go show you the pit stops. And then we're going to be able to come back and show you 2 years later how it's really working in the classroom. The difference between, because it worked over the summer, but how it's really working in the classroom. So just take a minute and watch this.
Some of these kids aren't even related to us. They just got suckered big time. I see a lot of comfort.
But when it was over, we had, especially Logan, the one that groaned at me and all right for a popsicle. He was like, we're done? What? I haven't finished my final draft yet. And we were like, okay, we're on to something. 4 of those kids were in middle school. 3 of them were in elementary school. But regardless of whether, the youngest was my daughter, she was just coming out of kindergarten, I think, to the 7th grader. They all loved it. It was the middle of the summer. It was for an hour. And we said, we think we're on to something. So what we're going to ask you to do now, and we'll talk more about it once we're in there, but in a true Writers Workshop format, you visit each pit stop when your draft is ready. Well, today we can't do that because you're all at different places in the draft that you just wrote, and we want you to see all of the different pit stops and how we use them. And so you have a sticky note on your packet, and that's just going to organize you when we get in there so we can kind of rotate. And what we're going to do is there are 5 different pit stops. There are actually 6. You've already done drafting. But there are 5 different pit stops that we want you to see how we've put them into play. And so when you come into the classroom, you'll see a board that has cars on it with numbers. We use those in the classroom too. And so your number coincides with the pit stop. So for instance, if you have numbers 1, 4, or 9, you're going to be looking for the peer conference pit stop. That's where you're going to start. If you have numbers 5, 6, or 10, you're going to start at revising. And if you forget this, it's up on the board. If you have numbers 2 or 7, you're going to come to me for a teacher conference. And if you have numbers 3, 8, or 11, you're going to go to publishing. And again, your draft isn't ready for publishing. Obviously, that would be your last pit stop. But you're just going to see each one and how it would work. We ask that you bring that draft with you and kind of think about how you would use it. At every pit stop, there's a tent that says like peer conference, and underneath that tent are the directions of what, as a student, they would do there. And regardless of whether you're teaching 3rd grade or high school, we realize we're presenting something that once you get in there looks very elementary, but any level could adapt it to work for their level. And last, don't feel like you have to take a lot of notes in there, because at each table there are little yellow cards. We call them pit passes. It reminds you about the 6 trades, but on the other side it has the address to our wiki, where everything that you see in there that's been created is on there. Nice. And so you can go and access
Available
it.
for download, modifying. If you don't like race cars, you like unicorns, you can put the unicorns on there. Yeah, whatever. Also too, the packet is very helpful because, again, the annotated bibliography has a list of all of the books that we use to develop this model. There are some books in there though that you'll see that aren't on the annotated bibliography, and that's just the evolution of our model, from a few envelopes in a living room on the floor to full-blown baskets that look like centers that are constantly being changed and updated. And I also wanted to point out too, this may look random in your packet. It's a picture of a big clipboard. This is a county-produced document. This is Frederick County's attempt at aligning the trades with the writing process. And so I hope you see that this model we're introducing you to takes that so much beyond what the county is laying out for us. But as you can see here, they've tried hard to align the traits of ideas and organization with the pre-writing process, and they've tried to align ideas, voice, and organization with the drafting process. So what we've done is kind of use this as a springboard, and we really want you to pay attention to where those traits show up at each of those pit stops. It's not necessarily where the county says they should be. Imagine that.
And then when we're finished, we'll come back here to kind of pull it all together. So if you don't mind grabbing your writing utensil and your draft and whatever else you want to bring with us, we're going to go down the hall to a different classroom.
We're going to be in there for about 20 minutes, so if you want to bring your beverage, top up on some ice water.
Are you coming back here?
We will. We will.
At the directions, and just kind of getting a feel of what you do with the draft you have based on the directions. Jill, you were waving at me.
Oh, first of all,
number one is a peer
goes
conference.
to peer conference, so this would be your parking spot there.
Thank you.
So, we started this whole baby with just manila envelopes that had some materials inside. Saved on space, the envelopes stored flat. And as this baby has evolved, we've moved on to baskets, and the baskets are loaded with all kinds of things. So I just wanted to show you a little bit about what might be in the drafting pit stop. Since you've already done your drafting, no one's actually going to visit this pit stop, but it gives the students directions underneath their tent to tell them what to do while they're here. And inside might be a bunch of different graphic organizers that they can use as models in their writer's notebooks. In here might be some writing prompts that they can use as a springboard for ideas. There's a great resource called Yoga for the Brain, and these are nice writing warm-ups. For example, write about a scar you have, physical or emotional. Complete this sentence 10 different ways. Hope is ... So some of these, great for intermediate, secondary writers. Some of these would be really hard for elementary students to jump at right away. There's this great resource that you can buy at toy stores called Story Cubes. So for your kinesthetic, tactile learners, this is a nice way to get them involved. You roll the dice, there's pictures on the cubes. They write a story that uses all those things. A teepee, a lightning bolt, a turtle, the earth. It sounds like Earth Day tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
There are these doodle books. You can get them at Barnes & Noble, are a great way to prompt some drafts because they have a picture here that they can complete. Now write about the picture.
And actually, after you get into Writer's Workshop and have it set up, I use those every once in a while for a mini lesson. Just put one of those pocket doodles up on the Homo and give everybody 5 minutes to brainstorm something about it.
So we'll leave this set up for you to explore too if there's some extra time. But we provide a variety of materials so that no one is sitting there in your classroom going, I don't know what to write about. I don't know what to write about. So that's our drafting pit stop, and that's available. But luckily you all did some drafting for us. So take a look underneath those tents. Grab those little yellow cards if you need some refresher on what those 6 traits are. And explore your little station, your pit stop for about 4 or 5 minutes.
I'm going to talk just a little bit about teacher conference because I find teacher conference to be the most challenging in elementary school.
Talk to each other about how
You've got twice as a so it's incredibly challenging. Okay, and I'm sure you have a similar situation. So in my classroom, I try to do teacher conference concise and focus on something.
Peer conferences.
Now this paper, what is it? But it's what we developed from this book. This book is in another classroom. You can look at it. It's about 40 reproducible forms for the writing traits classroom. And they had a page where it was one kid and lots of data. For me, that was too big. I didn't want that. I wanted something really short and quick. So I just adapted it to be able, I got it, thanks. To be able to put 4 kids at a time. On a good day, I get 3 teacher conferences maybe. But the way I run a teacher conference is I have the child read their draft to me, and I have them sitting next to me, and I just listen. And I listen the whole time. And while I'm listening, I'm thinking 2 things. Number 1, what am I going to focus on today? Because I'm not going to get a perfect paper out of this teacher conference. So I've got to focus on one teaching point. And number 2, what did we focus on last time? So I've got my clipboard with all these papers. So I've got Steve, and I've already flipped to Steve to see the last time I met with him, and I gave some scores from 5 to 1 on whether you were strong. And I'm looking for the 3 or the 2 because I want to hone in on it. Or I'm looking for the thing that I noted to myself worked the whole time on quotation marks. Because I want to see if this draft coming up, you got the quotation marks thing working. So I listen, I think, but as soon as they're finished, I always ask the exact same question. What's your favorite part of the story? 9 times out of 10, when they find their favorite part, it is the voice of their writing. Voice is by far, in my opinion, the hardest thing to teach a child, especially a young child. But when they find that favorite part, it's usually the part where they felt the passion of their writing. And so they might say, it's that part where I talked about how the power windows go down on my car and how I put my head out and the wind hit my face. And I'll say, that's your voice. That's your voice. And you know, in this first paragraph, I didn't hear your voice as much. Would you tell me about why your car was traveling to Toronto? And the next thing you hear are all these details that never got to the paper. They're up here, right? They're telling you about Toronto and why last time his cousin was there and his cousin brought the pet turtle and he really wanted to see the pet turtle again, and none of that's in there. And so you're like, wow, wow, that needs to be here because I can't live in your brain and that needs to be in this draft. And depending on what kind of writer you have, they're either going to be like, yeah, you're right, or I don't want to write more. At that moment, I will say to my third graders, well, how do you feel about me taking your paper? Say that again. I'm going to write that here. Take the writing off them. Those ideas were fantastic. Let's get them in there. Show them how you make a little star or a carrot. Flip that paper over, star it, and write down what they just told you so that they can see like how you can think about it again, how you can add details, and how you can add that voice, because truly most of the time what their details and their passion about the story is their voice. But often it doesn't come out in a lot of parts of their writing. Does that make sense? So I don't do much instruction about voice in the classroom because I haven't found a great way to do it. I do it all here. They do. They have to, it's a one-on-one, pull it out of them kind of thing. And again, that's the hardest part of Writer's Workshop.
If you had a tape recorder right here, you could have that child talk and please you be talking to another child too. I don't know if it's possible.
That's a great idea. I mean, the way technology is fanning out. I mean, I've even thought about, because of what you just said, I've even thought about, having the tape recorder or the iPad or the iPhone, depending on what you have. I don't either, but with a recording device, so that as that child is giving me those details, I can say, okay, go back to your seat, just play, put some of that on there, and then I can take it.
Meanwhile, you got these two, plus some of yes.
Yeah. So, but it's a very powerful conversation. Now, the thing I explain to my parents over and over, my kids publish pieces after we meet at a teacher conference. Now, sometimes I'll say, okay, now, we've worked on the first part of this with capital letters. You need to go back to your seat now and fix all of it. You don't have to wait in line. Come show it to me, and then you're going to be ready for publishing. That piece, when it gets published, it's going to have a perfect capitalization. And it's not going to be perfect in other places. Because I worked on capitalization on a child. Next piece, capitalization better be there. That's what I'm looking for, right? But then next piece, we're going to work on beginning, middle, and end, because that really wasn't, the organization was out of order. And then that piece, when they publish it, will be really strong in organization. And so that your goal would be by June, if you publish a piece a quarter or maybe two, you have a really strong piece where you're not talking about capitalization anymore. You're not talking about word choice. You're talking about taking the voice and the passion coming out. Now, everybody's classroom is different. I run Writer's Workshop twice a week. My kids know Tuesday and Wednesday is the Writer's Workshop. It is my kids' days. Boys, girls, it doesn't matter. They love it. They love the freedom. But I also teach writing in a structured way outside of because, for instance, they have to produce well, that's me telling them to write. The workshop is supposed to be about what they want to write about. In my classroom, I've kept it very separate because I want them to treasure that creative writing. Of course, so if we're doing an opinion argument piece that has something to do with science or social studies, I'll teach it during the time. I'll bring it right back. Or I'll bring it in during the language arts block. It's not Writer's Workshop.
My car's
Twice a week I teach the true.
We spend a lot of time in the beginning of the year from
So your class is a teacher conference. Yeah, there's lots of different materials here, but I use my teacher conference for very one-on-ones, 5 to 7 minutes.
what the county says is important. So this is their time. They don't take advantage of it. They harness it.
And they're choosing the topic to write it out.
Now I use this as later in the year to take them through portfolio pieces that I have to collect at the end of the year. But to me, like, it's all about motivation and getting them excited about writing first. And once I get over that wall, I can do anything with them. They can do a biographical essay. They can do poems, poetry notebook. I mean, the possibilities are endless once they figure out this routine.
Well, a lot of,
Yeah.
the ESOL kids, a lot of those we start off with pictures and, you know,
It
really
is
allowing them to tell
totally up to
stories
you.
in pictures and
I
words.
think Karen does it twice a week. We need to get
Crazy.
ready to rotate,
No,
so if you could please pack up your pit stops.
I'm gonna share this
and take
once
a
we
look
get back
at
to
what's
classroom,
next
but
in
like,
the
this is one of my
sequence.
kids who
Karen does it
worked
twice
on a
a week.
cartoon, more pictures
Last year I
than
did it 3 times.
just a little bit of dialogue.
So are we moving on?
Absolutely.
I guess I can
So-
understand, like, you know,
45
having
minutes
more
is
of
the
the questions,
recommended.
because then, like, I could think of some of them
Well,
are
our
very
special
surface
education
questions.
Are you alone or the teaching here? Hi.
Very different.
I just want to say, at a teacher conference, I'm lucky if I get
Probably set up in
2 you're really done,
Working
backwards,
backwards.
it stops time.
So I just wanted to talk to you.
And there's a book in the other classroom called 40 Reproducible Forms for Writing Traits Classroom. The way that form is set up is that you have the name at the top and lots of
So,
data.
you
And
know,
I didn't want that
kindergarten
much paper,
classroom,
so we
secondary,
just adapted it, started keeping it short for
This,
kids.
some of
Kind
these
like
materials are right
perfect
next
world,
to
you get
a
four
computer.
kids.
Computer's always an option. A lot of kids have that
Just
as
write the name down, so I write the
so
piece.
you kinda have
And
to
then
have
as
to
I'm
make that
listening to you,
technology
when I'm
available.
finished,
But you're always gonna have kids who,
because
that's their go-to
Denise,
spot.
when you come back to me with your second draft,
That's their world.
and I really like that. And I make some more. And
My
tomorrow
kids
when I
love
go
this
to
series of
John's,
books. I don't know
I put that
if book
here.
fairs, but
So I
those
have
are the ones
about
that
5
sell out
sheets,
first.
right?
So I like putting them
I go like
in
this.
my basket right as they start reading and thinking about writing. And I also have to set the parameters that, you know, you're only looking at that book for 5 minutes, don't get lost in it because this is really how you're writing. But then you've got this series too that focuses on the different,
So I just refer back and
this is a series of books. This is just one that I happen to have a double copy of. And then you can't have an editing station where there's a dictionary.
Again, it works for me. It might not be the best way.
But maybe you have stuff in your own classroom that, you know,
other forms.
you could swap out for some of this stuff. Right. You don't have to go out and buy all new materials. It's just more aligning what you have with the purpose of this station.
I might use this.
What piece I was working on, so that I can save you something right here.
Nobody ever does.
No.
Yeah, I
And also set
you
the
I
tone.
can say, energize you were here and we talked
Alright,
about
get ready
the
to
car.
pack
You
up
really
your
worked
pit
on
stop.
notation words.
Take a look at the board and see what comes next.
And I'll just say, I think we get one go fix your quotation and then let's.
I've been placed there, the only thing I can figure out is to.
And again, these little yellow cards, not only say you remember where the traits, what the traits are, where they are, but they have a written on there and our contact information. So if you wanna access some of these created materials, on us, if you wanna leave us feedback on something you tried at work.
Do you try to find a part in your story where your voice didn't come
You ready to move?
We're gonna.
Alright, so editing, you're going to revising this, peer conference.
And we'll talk a little bit more about it.
Materials.
You guys are ready?
So where are we going?
Okay.
Coming right here.
Peer conference goes to editing.
It gave me
Editing
such a
goes
charge,
to revising.
you know? It's like they were
Publishing goes to peer conference.
Peer conference.
Teacher conference goes to publishing.
Or the writer of positive.
I don't know if I did that right.
So they read each other's here?
Now, in your packets, we have a peer conference form that we created that gives guiding questions, because we found peer conferences don't, it's not a natural behavior. But then we modified it to reflect other genres.
Is that in here?
No.
No.
And then a lot of feedback from other presentations said that the forms that we had are a little text heavy for the little ones. So I just put this out because I found this on Pinterest the other day. Ms. Jordan Reads is a blog, and she developed this, and along with organizers, so even the little ones can do peer conferencing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
And so I wanted to make that available, so that, you know, there's ready-to-use
true.
materials
You could
out
just
there.
do
You don't have to
one.
create your own.
Yeah.
Suzanne, you're getting away from your writing.
No, I wasn't.
No, I'm just teasing you. Remember what we were saying before? Instead of writing it down, we just take a picture of it with our digital camera.
Okay, there you go.
But how many times have we forced you to
I forget.
your piece over and over again? It really gets kids out of the name on the paper. I'm done.
That's what we
And
get.
now it's your problem.
This is great.
So this is like praise polish instead of praise polish.
Write myself. The idea would be I'd ask you to actually share your writing piece about your car. We talk a little bit about some change you made based on those pit stops. What I'd really like to do is share with you for a couple minutes some of the things that I have now that we didn't have then from students. One student in particular, I picked Steve. If you remember, I teach a magnet 3rd grade, which means that in language arts and math, I'm teaching at least 1 grade level above. So he's at least a 4th grade reader, and he's a very strong math student, but I wouldn't say he's a strong writer, and that's why I picked him. And so, as Jill shared with you, in my classroom, instead of a parking lot, we have a writer's notebook. And we start off the year kind of personalizing our writer's notebook, drawing a picture, and then we do a lot of different things where they can create ideas. We go outside, look at something, draw a picture, and we write down the 4 senses while we were outside. What did you hear, see, smell, feel? My favorite things was one of my mini lessons, just make a list of your favorite things. So we went through some mini lessons. But then this is where they draft. And one of the things that I have come to find is that I will have kids who come for a teacher conference and they've kind of skipped a few of the pit stops. And they think they're gonna, get one by me. But without even knowing what we were doing, we kind of made this foolproof way that they can't do that. Because you see, in order to have gone through the editing pit stop, you've got colored pencil on your draft. And in order to go through the editing pit stop, you've got highlighter on your draft. And so when you come to me with your draft, I'm gonna know right away. Because you either have it or you don't. And so if there's no highlighting, I say,
Off with you.
I know that it said you had to highlight 3 words that you think might be misspelled. Oh, I think I forgot that pit stop. Okay, well, here you go. Because I can't meet with you until you've gone through that pit stop. So we kind of found this sure-proof way. Well, Steve started off writing an autobiography. It was like 1 paragraph, and it was called Steve. And Steve, what'd you say?
Go figure.
Yeah, go figure. It was called Steve. Oh, I thought I had it right here. And Steve has morphed into a paragraph writer. Oh, here it is. Steve. But Steve is now writing multi-paragraph stories. Here we have one called The Pond of Youth that I just loved. And he chose to write this one because typing takes too long. And so he asked me to find paper with a tree. Anytime we go and find paper, then we stock up the notebook so there's more tree paper. And this was a wonderful story. But in Pond of Youth, he didn't have a strong ending. This is his story. And so well developed, and then it was like, boom, one of those, and then they died. And it's over, that kind of thing, or to be continued. You see that all the time, right? And I was like, Steve, let me ask you a couple questions. I'm talking to him, and so finally I'm like, do you see how I still have all these questions, but the story's over? So we've really got to, and he just kind of looked at me with his face like, I cannot write another word, Mrs. Wills. And I was telling you during teacher conference, I'll often say, well, how about if I write, you talk to me? So you'll see, this is my writing down here. And so he went on to tell me, because it's all about this older couple that went to the Pond of Youth and they wanted a child. It's a beautiful story. But anyway, he told me the ending of the story, and we were able to really make a solid ending where I didn't have any questions, nor would any other reader. On other things that he's done, this was called Snowy Day. It was a narrative all about his snowy day. But in particular, I didn't work a lot with him, except for there was this one place that he said something and I had a question. And when I asked him, he said, maybe I should have put that there. And I said, well, do you want to? And he said, well, will you? Because now he knows I'll write for him, right? So, but I wrote it there. It was one thing. And then he had found a lot of things he thought were misspelled. And so he and I worked on them. He's got lots of drafts in here that haven't been revised or edited. Oh, he likes graphic stories. He did this graphic story about the pigeon versus the worm.
There's the
And
mobile little series.
he did it like this. So this was the way he wanted to tell the story. But he's a kid who has really blossomed in Writer's Workshop after he's seen different mini lessons, after he's seen modeling of different genres of writing. But when he comes I told one group and I forgot to tell everybody else, I don't leave the cars up for teacher conference, I make a list. So when they want a teacher conference, they come and sign a list. And that's because they're not going to get to see me the day they want to see me. There's way too many kids waiting. So they have to put their car in a different pit stop. And very often that other pit stop is drafting. So they've got multiple drafts going on in here that they're not publishing at that time. They just might have written something, they might have abandoned it, maybe they're going to come back to it. This says Star Wars, and he's got an arrow, star peace. It got one block, and then he abandoned it. Maybe he'll go back to it. War to peace. One day there was a war, he abandoned it. But then here it is again, War to Peace. And actually this says by Steve, edited by Jerry. That's very funny. So again, the collaboration. He got out with Jerry, and Jerry got his red pen out and started editing it. This is where all the ideas and the thoughts and the pieces that he's working on stay. But then when it's pit stop time, it's his time to say, okay, what piece do I want to walk through the process? So he's got lots of pieces here. He hasn't taken through the process either because he doesn't think they're worthy, or he hasn't had time yet, or he just doesn't want to do that. But Steve, I just thought, was a really great example of a kid who went from one paragraph, my name is Steve, to the Pond of Youth, and a comic strip all about the bird and the worm, and a snowy day narrative. He's really blossomed as a writer, and it's evident when you look through his writer's notebook that he understands the processes and is being able to take those traits, that language, and put it and use it to improve his writing.
Quotes are a really great way to prompt writing, especially from older students. And so we're going to wrap up today with a quote from Ruth Cullum, the trait lady herself. She says that many people think that making students aware of the traits is the answer to teaching writing. But it's not the magic bullet any more than Writer's Workshop is. The writing traits are a fine assessment tool and a kind of language to communicate about writing. Writing Workshop is a structure to encourage writers to write often and for a variety of purposes. And the writing process is just that, a series of reflective stages that writers go through as they figure out what to say and how best to convey it in writing. So when I think about that quote, I instantly think of the theme. And I say, okay, the writing process is the road that we strive to take our students on throughout the course of the year. Now, the Writer's Workshop model is the vehicle through which we will take those kids on that journey. But it's only in conjunction with the traits, the tires that keep that vehicle to the road, that we have that universal language to converse with students about their writing and help them improve.
So, based on the knowledge that we were able to give you today and the pit stops and information that you got to see in the other room, we hope, it would be our hope, that you have moved along that racetrack of knowledge and being able to explore things about Writer's Workshop and 6 traits. So that your comfort level might be increased a little, or your ability to use any piece of it. We need you to know that this kind of product is 2 years of working with this model. And like I said early on, we really feel like now we have a well-working
Oiled machine.
Thank you. But certainly there are pieces of it, regardless of what age, grade level, or subject you teach, that could help you, help your students see those drafts through multiple perspectives and really reshape it as you did that car, as you were making it, to make it a better model.
So we really do appreciate your time. We're running a little bit late, but the last page of your packet gives you a chance to reflect on everything you've seen and heard, give yourself a score, where you are on the racetrack now versus at the beginning of our session. And hopefully you'll spend some time answering the question of what new knowledge or strategy presented today can be applied to your classroom, not this spring, but maybe this fall, because we're all wrapping up our school years and our semesters now. But this is a great time to field test one idea that you could fine tune for the fall. Baby steps, right? Baby steps.
You know what book I don't see, Jill?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you know about light tools for the writing classroom? And so also the editing page that I think is in the packet, editor's marks?
Editor's
Yes,
marks
there
came
is.
out of this one too. There's
Okay.
2 different versions.
Okay, well, it's in here too. So, you know, some of the things that are in there, obviously things like from this book, you can't access from the wiki, but and a
But it
lot
is
of
on
the
the
books
list of
are on the
sponsors.
bibliography,
Yep.
but feel free, as you wrap up and as you get ready to leave, to thumb through any of them. This one's a great one. Another, TC from our program did her whole program about writing based off of photography. And what's great about this book, it comes with the CD of all the photographs, and you just put a photograph up for the kids. It's a great mini lesson, and just say, for the next 10 minutes, write about this picture.
What's going on?
And there's one I can't flip to it quickly, but we did one day, and oh, here it is actually.
The
It's
baseball?
this older person, reaching into the trash can.
Gotcha.
And I have a kid that just published a piece that he started
About that
based
guy?
on this photograph.
That's
So,
cool.
yeah, I love this book.
And
This
that's
is
where you
hers.
get the art in there.
Yeah.
Get some Ansel Adams photos up there. Go to town.
So thank you, and our contact information is also on the wiki if you ever have any questions or anything like that.
Thanks
Thanks
for
for
having
having
us.